Hello, everyone. I would like to welcome you to this week's Friday Reflections. I'm Pastor Scott Sussler, pastor here at Trinity Lutheran, and I thank you for joining us here today. Just a couple of items of note coming up. This coming Sunday, January 24th, we are going to be doing a 4 p.m. outdoor service in our back field in commemoration and connection with the Week of Prayer for Christian Unity, which we are in the midst of right now. Pastor Katie does a wonderful job of describing this in her Wednesday Garden of Grace. So for more information, I'm going to direct you there. But this is a week basically where we in the Christian church around the world pray for a sense of unity, which is going to be my theme I'm going to talk about here today in just a couple of moments. But it's a time where, as a people of God, we come together and pray for unity within our churches, our denominations, our congregations. And again, if we can show a sense of unity, if we can be a model for the world, that becomes very, very important today, because if we can't have unity, then we can't really say much to the world. And so we have to look at ourselves first, and hopefully we can find ways to provide a good model in the world today. The other thing is just a heads up, coming on Sunday, February 14th, which is Valentine's Day, we're going to be doing a special renewal of vows sort of type thing in the afternoon at 5 o'clock via Zoom. So watch for information on that. Again, that'll be on Valentine's Day, Sunday the 14th, about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. It's a Zoom where we can get together and celebrate our relationships and also remember the vows that we made as couples. So please remember that coming up in a few weeks as well. So we hear a lot today about unity. We hear it, you heard it in the inauguration speech. I've been talking about it. Pastor Kay's been talking about it. We're in the week of prayer for Christian unity. This seems to be the sort of the buzzword right now, which makes a lot of sense, because I think we all know that things are not real unified right now on a lot of fronts in our country, maybe, even within our own states, even sometimes within our own families and our own circles of friends. Things are tense right now sometimes. Those things happen, and when they happen, you have to deal with them. And you hear a lot of talk about unity. And as I was thinking about today, I'm a little bit of a realist. You'll probably find that out. I'm very theological, but I think that you also have to balance that with being a realist. And I'll be honest with you, my experience with unity is very, very hard. Unity is very, very hard. It's not easy to do. It's hard to be unified at times, with my spouse, with my children, even with some of my closest colleagues. And even with people in the church. I mean, it's fun to talk about. It's nice to talk about. I think we all know that we're supposed to be doing this, but it's not easy. And I think we need to realize that and say that and just acknowledge that it's not easy. Unity is not easy, and it's a lifelong process. It's not something that ever, really, I think, gets accomplished. It's something that's always ongoing. And lots of times we talk about unity, but we don't ever really talk about, well, how do we do it? How do we make for unity? What does unity look like? And of course, I'm not going to be able to do that in a short segment here today, but I'm going to share a couple of things that I think can help us, at least have been helpful to me when we talk about unity. And one of the best examples of unity that we can have from the Bible is Jesus and his disciples. When you read the Gospels, if you follow Jesus and his disciples from the Gospels actually through the book of Acts, if you will, and even beyond if you want, you see this very interesting sort of phenomenon going on of how Jesus took these 12 men who were, in many respects, very different, and he made them one. It's maybe one of the most underrated, unspoken miracles I think that Jesus ever performed, was being able to take these 12 men and over a period of years, turn them into a group of people that changed the world. I think lots of times we think these 12 men were all alike, but I'm telling you they weren't, okay? Actually, some of them were the exact opposites. Jesus had a very diverse group of people. I've read about these disciples many times, and there's a lot of things that we know and a lot of things we can only conjecture because of the information we have. But you get a sense if you get to know these 12 men, and 13 if you add on Matthias later, who replaced Judas, is that, man, they were an eclectic group of guys. You had people sort of on the higher socioeconomical and the lower socioeconomical. You had people that were fishermen or businessmen. You had one in there they believed was from a royal family. Probably the most intriguing part is you had some of these disciples were what were known as zealots, and they were basically like patriots or nationalists that were ready to go to arms at any moment to overthrow the Roman government. On the other hand, you had a tax collector that worked for the Roman government that was hated especially by the zealots. So you have two groups of people in the same group that hated one another on a day-to-day basis, And then you throw in personalities like Peter, who was very abrasive. You have personalities of some that you never hear from because they were probably quiet and just, didn't like the limelight and liked to work behind the scenes. And all of a sudden you find you got these 12 guys that should never be probably able to work together. But Jesus did a thing. He did a thing that was just amazing to me. He brought them together. It took a while. It took a lot of teaching. It took a lot of patience because they didn't always get it. Many times they didn't get it at all. Jesus would tell them one thing, they'd turn right around and do the opposite. No different than us, very obviously. But in the end, he brought them together and they went out and they shared a message that changed the world. So how did he do this? Well, two things I want to focus on. One is he taught them the value of love and what love was really about. And see, the love that Jesus came to show us, that was the love of God, and the kind of love that he called us to have for one another, was not this love that's based on emotion or a love that made you feel good or was an easy kind of love for those that are easy to love. No, this was a kind of love, the agape love that Jesus showed us that God was about, was a kind of love that always, in all circumstances, no matter how it felt, no matter what the circumstances were, that always tried to reach for the goodwill of another person, okay? That's the kind of love that Jesus talked about. I'm going to read to you from 1 John 4, verses 16 to 20. It's a good description of what Jesus was talking about. And here it says, God is love, and God is love, and those who abide in love abide in God, and God abides in them. Love has been perfected among us in this way, that we may have boldness on the day of judgment, because as he is, so we are in this world. There is no fear in love. This is important. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. For fear has to do with punishment, and whoever fears has not reached perfection in love. We love because God first loved us. Those who say, I love God, and hate their brothers and sisters are liars. And those who do not love a brother or sister whom they have seen cannot love God whom they have not seen. I think a lot of today, a lot of the disunity that we have today is really from this thing we call fear. It's a fear that somehow someone's going to be better than me. Someone's going to get something that I'm not going to get. Someone's going to take over control and power. I'm going to lose out on something. My life is going to go down the tubes. There's a lot of fear that exists today around people and groups and colors of skins and gender and sexuality, all those things. And really, at the core of that is fear. If we're really honest with ourselves, and I know this is true of me too, when I'm honest with myself, it's usually a fear. I'm afraid of something. I'm afraid something bad is going to happen. And when that happens, I get defensive, I want to get protective, and I go into that kind of a mode. But what we hear here is this kind of love that Jesus talked about, that he taught his disciples, that eventually they were able to capture, was a love that was able to deal with those things and not be afraid. Was able to deal with them head on and not be afraid. And they were able to disagree with one another and not be alike, and that was okay. Okay? because they found this kind of love, this kind of deep love that really was a love that they had come to experience that God had for them despite their brokenness. And in that, then they were transformed to be able to have that kind of love with each other, even when they disagreed with one another. There's a difference, folks, between uniformity and unity. Uniformity is where everyone is alike, thinks alike, acts alike. This is what usually leads to things like cults and sects and cliques. And if you give them a calling card, it can lead to violence. Unity implies that there are going to be differences, by the way. If you think about it, unity implies there are differences. The unity that the Bible calls is not a uniformity, but it's a unity amongst the differences we might have. It's a being able to love despite maybe not being in agreement or liking someone. There's a higher calling here of love, of looking beyond self, of seeing beyond self, to the love that God has for us, and then the love we're called to have for one another, and that is primary and first and foremost in our lives. So that's one of the things Jesus taught them, was the value of true love, of what agape love was. Not the love that just felt good or was there for people that they liked, but a love that took into account even their enemies and the people that they didn't like. We heard about these zealots that Jesus had. It was amazing how he transformed them from people who were ready to go to violence at any moment to overturn the government to get what they wanted, to people who gave their life for others, out of the means of love. Not of overthrowing the government anymore, but of going out and showing people the way to true life, the true joy and true peace. It's amazing how Jesus transformed, that zeal that they had from one way to the way of love. And that's what God comes to do with us as well. Secondly, the thing that Jesus did was he got these 12 men to focus on a mission. He got them to buy into something bigger than themselves. And that to me is what's truly important today, is that when people have something of a higher nature that they're working toward, it's easier to set aside the differences and the petty things that go on between them. Let me read to you again the Great Commission that Jesus gave to all, not only those original disciples, but to all of us as well. This comes from Matthew 28, 18 to 20. It says, "And Jesus came and said to them, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Go therefore, make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, of the Son, of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything that I've commanded you. And remember, I am with you always to the end of the age." That's our calling card, folks. That's what we're called to do. And we're not called to do that just with people who think like us. We're called to do that with the body of Christ, even with people who don't think like us. It's amazing when there's a need or something in the community, how people can put aside their differences to come together for that. It's amazing how in the midst of tragedy, people put aside the things that separate them. They'll come together for the good of that person or that situation. It's no different here. We're called, to be able to look at something bigger than ourselves, something, above ourselves, outside of ourselves. That is this great commission that Jesus gave us, to go out and to share God's love with the world. And we don't always have to agree how to do that. We don't always have to be friends to do that. We don't always even have to be on the same page to do that. But if in our hearts we have love, and if we have love for others, and this becomes our overriding priority in life, then that's where unity has a chance. That's where unity has a chance. So, when we talk about unity, folks, it's not easy. Let's not fool ourselves. It's difficult stuff. And it's not something we're just going to do in the next few weeks or few months here. It's something we have to do ongoing. It's part of who we are. But we're not working towards uniformity. Unity means that we can look at a brother and sister who might look different, act different, be different, even think different, have different political views, and say, you know what, out of love, we're going to dialogue, we're going to talk, we're going to see if we can work this out, and we're going to continue to work toward what God called us, and that's love for others. I believe God works through all of us. There's no one set way or perfect way. God works through all of us, and that God will use all of us to do God's bidding. Now, this is not to say that we don't stand up for our convictions, or that there aren't some boundaries here and some baseline things. Actually, that's what Jesus taught them about love. The baseline for Jesus was love. Everything else just went from there, If people are not loving, if people are destructive, if people are doing things that are breaking down community, yeah, that needs to be called out. And we can't, can't stand in solidarity with that. But my experience is that's more the exception than the rule. Most of us want to do God's will. Most of us want to do what's right. It's just sometimes it's hard for us to get beyond ourselves to do that. Jesus calls us to an agape love that looks at the other as important as ourselves. And Jesus calls to a mission that's beyond ourselves, something more important than ourselves. And that is to be able to go out and share that agape love in the world today. Folks, God's blessings to you. Hang in there, take care, and hope to see you soon.